Humdrummity, humdrummity, humdrummity.
Welcome back, listeners. My guest today believes we can achieve anything as long as we are not tempted to achieve everything. As a productivity life coach, Emily Guerra will guide us through breaking free of the hustle culture, surviving the loneliness epidemic, and how to find work-from-home life balance. Tune in to the end to hear if Emily will soon fulfill her dream for herself. Okay, put on your listening hat and let's get productive. Hi, Emily, and thank you for joining me on the show today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to dive in with you.
Now, where in the world do we find you today?
Today, I am in Los Angeles, California, born and raised here.
Born and raised, so you're a native Los Angelesite. What's the term that we call someone from LA?
Angelino.
Angelino. Okay. So I would like to start by just having you tell us what your job title is and talk about the services that you provide.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I am a productivity life coach and founder of the Productivity Flow. A lot of people know what a productivity coach is. A lot of people know what a life coach is. Not a lot of people know what a productivity life coach is because I really like to combine the two together. So, really, I am all focused about empowering you to overcome different mindset hurdles so that way you can actually achieve work life balance through systemizing your work from home life. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and hybrid workers. So both like a fully at home schedule and a hybrid schedule.
Now, as I prepared for our interview today, one of the things I noticed that you talk about is this shift in society's, toxic culture about productivity and mental health. So your services merge those two concepts together. Can you tell us more about those two concepts and why they're so important?
Oh, I love this question because I think we so often kind of put productivity in its own kind of sphere and then mental health in a totally separate sphere. We never really connect or combine the two. But if we think about our experiences, right? And like whenever we're feeling, whether it's crappy about ourselves or full of doubt, procrastination, all of those kind of mental hurdles, the mental health struggles that we can experience really can either inhibit or boost your productivity. And so they really do align with each other more so than I think we talk about. And I think the reason that we really don't talk about it that much is because that we are all stuck in this hustle culture mentality right now. And we're really, really glued to the idea that we have to constantly be busy, that we're measuring our success through our exhaustion and how stacked our calendar is. And all of those things actually kind of hurt our mental health. And so we never really connect the dots like that, which is what my passion is and what I'm all about, helping people actually see that their mental health, their lifestyle, all of the things that we think about in the personal growth sphere do relate to the work sphere and your productivity and your work performance, right? So I love kind of bridging that gap for people.
How can we avoid the pitfalls that are associated with the hustle culture and find productivity?
Good question, because I think ultimately this is what my coaching is all about, right? Empowering people to escape the hustle culture, not just right now, but for good, ultimately. And so for me, that really starts in the day to day, in your routines, especially, or lack of routines, or maybe too structured routines, right? I think it really plays into how busy we are, how we're taking care of ourselves. And if we can actually kind of create a schedule that fulfills us and doesn't drain us, we will notice we're suddenly not hustling as hard anymore. We don't have that guilt when we rest anymore because we actually feel fulfilled. So I really do believe it has a lot to do with work-life balance, choosing to have balance, choosing to rest, viewing rest as productive, right? All of these kind of mindset shifts that we need in order to actually take care of ourselves and give ourselves the things that we need to be successful, not to burn out. Because right now, the way that we're all going about life it's really leading to burnout. And I think we're seeing the data that proves this, right? We are seeing the highest rates of depression ever. We're seeing the highest rates of burnout ever. We are seeing, we're still actually stuck in a state of isolation, right? And I know that the Surgeon General in the US actually said that we are literally in I forgot the exact terminology that he used, but he basically said that we are in a state of isolation and a state of loneliness, a loneliness epidemic. That's what he used. So it's very prevalent in our day-to-day life how the hustle culture has really seeped into our definition of success and our definition of productivity. And because of that, we needed to kind of ultimately change the way we view success and the way that we view productivity in order to change our behaviors and make sure that we can actually have that balance and not just the hustle.
So, just back to some of your
Yeah.
history, because you promote this on your site that
Mhm.
you have been going to therapy
Oh,
since you
yeah.
were 12 years old.
Yeah.
Now, has this, first of all, and you can decide how much you want to share on this podcast, but what were the reasons for you to go to therapy?
Mhm.
Does this relate to where you now ended up with your current professional life? And what are some of the lessons you can tell us about that?
Oh, I love talking about therapy because so many people are really uncomfortable talking about it. And I want to erase that stigma. Every single person in the world, including therapists, need therapy. It's just, we all need a little bit of guidance and a little bit of help and outside perspectives and tools to help us go through situations we haven't been through before, right? So, what really got me started on my journey with therapy was my parents actually got divorced when I was around 12 years old. And the smartest thing that they ever did, even through a pretty crappy divorce, if I'm being honest with you, they were not amicable in a lot of terms. But the one thing that they did agree on was they wanted to help me cope and they wanted to help me thrive during all of this change and kind of turbulence happening in our family life, right? So they sent me to therapy. And I, of course, at first was so angry about it because it made me feel like I was the problem. Like I was the reason that my parents were getting divorced. But through working with my therapist, through my parents coming into sessions with me and us doing joint sessions, I learned so much about not just myself, but also about my family, why they were getting a divorce, why things don't work out, why relationships are hard, and how that seeps into my personal life, the way that I feel about myself, my self worth, and even my performance at school, right? So it really got me started on kind of understanding like, oh, I can learn more about my brain, how I work, how I function, and how other people function. And if I get this insight, life is a little bit easier. It makes sense, right? Things click easier. And I feel empowered to actually move forward. So I actually have stuck with therapy ever since because I've really, number one, loved it. I feel like I learn every single session. But I also really believe that it has led me to coach, to do what I do today, right? If I hadn't started learning about mindset, mental health, mindset shifting strategies, then I don't think I ever would have blended it with productivity the way that I do now. I think that it created a very strong and solid foundation for me to build upon, right? Because nowadays I'm honestly obsessed with learning about the brain, how it works, how to make it work as the superpower that it really is. And I don't think that would have started without going to therapy at such a young age. So yeah, I think it's definitely led me here today. And some of the biggest lessons that I have learned, and let me be honest, that I still learn and need to learn, are really number one, I cannot control other people. I think that was a big one for me because I always wanted to control other people or to control the situation, and learning that I can only control myself and only control my reactions and having some tools to control myself and control my reactions. That was a really big shift for me. And then I think another huge lesson that I learned, and this was actually one of the first lessons that I learned in therapy, was that I function and work a little bit differently, especially than those in my family. And let me explain what I mean by that. I was not diagnosed with ADHD until after I graduated college. So I went through all of school wondering why I was slower at things, why things didn't click for me, why my older brothers could get things so easily and they could get really good grades, and I had to study for hours and hours and hours just to get B's. I always thought something was wrong with me. And my therapist really helped me uncover throughout middle school and high school that nothing's wrong with me. I'm just a little different, and that's okay. Let me figure out how to work in a way that works for me instead of trying to fight against me. And that's when I really started creating my own productivity systems without even realizing that's what I was doing at the time. But I created a whole system for taking notes in class. I created a whole system for studying at home after school. I created even a whole system for organizing my closet, and I actually still use that system today. So I created little routines and systems for myself to help me ground myself, to help me get back that focus and actually move forward without the anxiety, without the overwhelm, without the negative self talk and depleting my self worth, right? That really started in therapy. So I definitely am so grateful that my parents did make that decision together, even during that difficult time, to send me to therapy, because it really has not only built the mental health foundation, but also the systems foundation, that productivity foundation, without even realizing it.
Right. So then, with your idea of productivity, is it
Mhm.
really an individualistic need or way of finding a system? Now, you try and help people find systems that they can become more, productive, but in the end, is it really need to be tailored for the individual?
So I think that there's some foundational things that are pretty standard across the board, right? However, every person is different. You have different goals, a different workload, a different value system. You have a different lifestyle, a different schedule than I do. So the systems that work for me may not work for you, right? And that's okay. That's the beauty of productivity. I always say productivity is personal, because you do have to figure out what are those systems that actually make your life easier. Just because somebody else wakes up at 5 a.m. and they swear that they are the most productive in the mornings before everybody else in the house wakes up does not mean that you are going to wake up at 5 a.m. and be productive, because maybe your internal clock doesn't align with that, right? So you need to find your own system that aligns with your internal clock, your energy patterns, your thought patterns, and your goals. So there's a lot of I honestly believe outdated advice out there, like just grind harder, wake up at join the 5 a.m. club. Like if you get this planner or this app, then you're solved. Like none of those are true. They are all just things to sell, and they're all like one size fits all. And
Mm.
that's just not how productivity is, right? And I think we experience that every week when we do try to, let's say, do rigid time blocking. And then something unexpected comes up, your whole time block schedule goes awry, then your mindset starts to kind of go awry, and you start to beat yourself up because you can't follow that schedule. Well, that schedule actually failed you, not the other way around, right? So it's really a little bit of experimenting, a little bit of self discovery, a little bit of reflection, and a lot of practice. That's ultimately what you need to find those systems. And I just guide my clients through that process.
Right. So really, it sounds like to find the optimal way of being productive, there is a lot of trial and error.
Mhm.
Now, what can you tell me then about learning from our mistakes
Mm.
during this process?
Yes. So I think this is one of the big parts of coaching, right? Like kind of talking about, okay, how did it go last week? Like what were some hurdles that we experienced? And how can we, number one, assume that hurdle is going to happen again, right? I think that's a big thing that us humans, our tendencies, we want the ideal. right? We want it to be perfect. We want to do like the all or nothing mentality where we go all in, we do it perfectly, or we don't do it at all. And that kind of mentality can really set us up to fail because then you don't learn from the mistakes. So, one of the big questions that I ask my coaching clients all the time when we do talk about hurdles and uncover reasons why maybe they didn't practice something that we said that they would, we really dive into like, well, if this happens again, what's going to be your strategy, right? Let's come up with a backup plan, right? Let's have your ideal routine that's in a perfect world when nothing goes wrong. And then let's have that realistic routine, right? And then let's have another routine for when you have no time and you just need to go through it real quick. So let's have those options for you so that way you can navigate through those hurdles easily. But you have to know what those hurdles are. You have to acknowledge that they happened in the past and you have to prepare for them in the future. So I think that's one big thing that everybody can practice more and everyone can kind of learn from is not only like don't beat yourself up for a hurdle. You're human. Congratulations. Welcome to the club, right? But let's talk about it and let's see how we can overcome that hurdle next time. I think that to me is like the essence of moving forward, the essence of progress.
I would certainly want to speak more about some of the processes that you've come up with
Yeah.
and that you can suggest a bit later in our discussion. But one of the things I just want to touch on, and you somewhat just mentioned it earlier, but I think it relates to this quote you have on your website, which is, you can do anything, but not everything. So why does this quote have meaning for you, and what can we learn from it?
So I think a big tendency of all of us, and this really does tie into that hustle culture mentality of measuring our success by how busy we are, by how exhausted we are, feeling the need to do it all. Right? Like, not only do you have to do your 9 to 5, but then you should also work out for an hour a day. Then you should also spend time on the school. Then you should also take care of your kids and cook meals. And then you should also do this and that and this and that. And pretty soon you're going to have like a 46-hour day if you actually look at all the things that you want to do. So let's be realistic. You're not going to be able to do it all. You're just not. That's not humanly possible. You can't do everything, but you can do anything. You can do the things that actually matter, that actually either fulfill you, add to your relationships, move you closer to your goals, move you closer to those projects that have been on the back of your mind, right? Figuring out what are the things that align with my values, that give me meaning, that push me forward, that challenge me, that give me fulfillment and joy. Those are the things that I should really, really prioritize, right? Because I can't do everything, but I can do the things that matter. I can do anything. So that's why I really love that quote by David Allen.
Mm. So then how would you recommend for the people that come to you for
Mhm.
coaching to find their priorities?
Yes. So, one of the first activities I will do with a coaching client who seems to be a little unclear about what exactly their goals are or what exactly they need to do in order to move closer to their goals. One of the first activities that we'll do together is actually create a vision for their life 6 months from now, right? I don't love doing a vision for years from now because
Mm.
it's too far away. You're not going to relate to it. You're not going to feel motivated to get to it. But if it's this year, if it's just a couple months away, you are going to suddenly feel a lot more motivated to work on it and to make progress to achieve that vision. So we'll create kind of like a story of what their life looks like 6 months from now. And then we'll work backwards from that story. And we'll be like, okay, out of all of the brilliant things that are in your vision, what are the three things that you absolutely cannot live without? Like, if you couldn't have them, this would be devastating to you, right? Okay, those three things are your 3 6 months goals, right? So now let's work backwards from those goals. If you want to hit that in 6 months, what's the milestone that you need to hit every month until then, right? And now that we have monthly milestones, okay, what are the weekly action steps that you can do to achieve that monthly milestone? Now that we have those weekly action steps, what are the small, small daily action steps that you can do to move closer to your goals? Boom, you have your priorities. So that's one way that I really love to go about it. That is a little bit more of a holistic view, right? Because then people will actually have goals that are not just related to work. And that's the beauty of productivity life coaching is it doesn't always have to just relate to work. If you can have fulfillment outside of your work life, guess what? You're going to work better. You're going to have better work performance. You're going to have better well being. You're going to be more focused, more energized, more productive, all of the things. So it really does blend together in that way.
Yeah, and that's actually really the purpose of my podcast is for
Mm-hmm.
people to find those abilities to, find meaning, find purpose, find enjoyment outside of their day to day, which generally tends to be work. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back and just talk about this because I want to get your take and maybe more of an explanation because this always comes up, this idea of vision mapping. And to me, vision mapping just seems so ephemeral.
I so relate to that and I so get it. So I kind of go about creating a vision in a little bit of a different way than what you'll see out there on social media or like on Pinterest, for instance. So the way that I go about it really takes into account how the brain works, right? The brain, the way that we process thoughts, people talking, really anything is actually through a story, right? We're kind of telling ourselves stories all day long. If we think about our thoughts, they're not facts. They're opinions, right? They're stories that we've put together through all of our experiences throughout life, through whatever is coming at us. And so, knowing that and taking that into account, I always have my coaching clients write a story that is first person and in the present moment as if it's happening right now. And this actually helps the brain process that vision as number one, a story, but also as goals that are achievable because it's written in a way that the brain already processes things. So it doesn't have to do any extra work or any extra thinking. It's kind of just handed to it, right? And what's so cool when you actually close your eyes and visualize your vision, the brain processes that as a memory. And what's so cool about that is once it's a memory, your brain then says, oh, you've already done it. You can do it again. It's easy. You got it. Don't worry about it. Right. So it's a really cool way to use your brain as a superpower that it is. You have to keep your vision at the forefront of your mind. You can't just write it once, read it once, and then let it go. That's not going to do anything for you. You got to write it, read it, and then read it again and read it each week. That's my recommendation. And, normally this takes like what? 2 to 3 minutes to read it. It doesn't take any long effort. It's just a consistent practice. And the reason you really want to reread your vision over and over again is because you want to keep it at the forefront of your brain for the reticular activating system to work. Now, the reticular activating system in your brain is your filter. It's the part that says, hey, this is important. You need to pay attention to it. Or no, that's not important. You can ignore it. Right? So if we're reading our vision and we're telling our brain that our vision's important to us, that we really want to achieve this matters to us, and the way that we're telling our brain that is by rereading it over and over again, then the reticular activating system is going to start searching your world for things that relate to your vision, for things that can push you closer to your vision. This is kind of like the manifesting process a little bit, right? Proving that the world around you can push you closer. You just have to be open to it. So that is my process. It's really like neuroscience backed. I've done a lot of research to make sure that this process takes into account the brain, right? Because that's my whole thing. I love learning, like brain-based productivity is truly what I am so passionate about because it makes productivity easy.
So, what I would like to just move to is having you define the difference between goals and intentions.
So I actually, this was one of the things that I learned from my therapist, bringing it back to our conversation from earlier. So I was setting goals for myself that I just could not hit. And these were unrealistic goals. And I was in I would say it was like a 6 month kind of spiral of me just feeling like such a failure because I could not hit the goals that I was setting for myself. And I kept complaining to my therapist about it. And we would try to work through ways that I could hit the goals. And then ultimately, my therapist was like, you know what? It's not working for you. You need to kind of let go of that SMART framework, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. It's a very well known goal setting framework that most people are familiar with. She was like, you need to let that go. right? You need to get rid of the due date. You need to just sit in the actual and like, what's your intent behind this goal? Why do you want it? Right? Connect with that again. Feel yourself getting excited about the goal again, right? And then stick with the intention, the I am kind of sentence that you're trying to achieve. Focus just on that. How can you embody the person who is going to hit your goal? Right? That's what you should really be focusing on because all of the details, they're overwhelming you. They're causing confusion. They're also causing a lack of consistency. So let go of all the stuff that's keeping you stuck and focus on the emotion. Focus on the stuff that's actually making you excited and encouraging you to make that progress. That's the intention part of goals. And sometimes we do have to let go of the goals, right? Because if we're in that mindset of feeling like a failure, feeling like we're not doing enough to hit our goals, it's not serving us to have that goal. It's only keeping us stuck. So, this is a different framework that you can use instead of goal setting if you really do feel like you're in that rut.
Right. So back to writing our story then.
Yeah.
In our story, are we writing our intentions or are we writing our goals?
You have weaved this together so beautifully. So, in our vision story, we are definitely more writing our intentions, right? And then remember my process earlier. I said from there, we want to work backwards and figure out those monthly milestones, those weekly action steps, and then those daily action steps. I would say those monthly milestones, those are your goals. Your bigger goals, right? But they're all leading you to embody the you that's in the vision, the you that's in the story, because that's the intention behind the goals. So, yeah, it's a little bit of both.
So the overarching plot line of our story should be what? Where we want to get to? Is that chapter one is about where we want to get to, and then later on we get into the hows?
Exactly. Yep. Your vision should not worry about the how. The how is for the goals. The how is for when you work backwards from your vision. The vision is truly just about the what and the why. I always like to include the why in there because without the big why, the what doesn't matter, right? We can lose our connection with the what so easily if we don't have a why. So I always definitely encourage you to really weave in like, and this matters to me because and like having those kind of statements in your vision can really make you remember your vision. Even in those moments when you feel like you have no idea how you're going to hit your goals or your vision, you still remember, like, but you know what? That's the person I'm becoming. So let me act like that person right now because that I really want those benefits because it matters to me. And I have that in my vision. So I remind myself of why it matters to me to go through the ups and downs of achieving this goal.
As you say, we've been weaving this story together about all these, sort of techniques we can use. But I would now like to, change the focus of our
Okay.
conversation because why I actually had you come on the show today is
Mhm.
I wanted to speak with you as you have knowledge and expertise in this, is about people working from home and finding, that work from home life balance.
Yeah.
I really like this quote you said about being in an isolation epidemic. What can you tell us about, what is happening both psychologically and socially to people as more of us work from home?
Yes, such a prevalent question because if we look at life before the COVID-19 pandemic and life after the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the biggest changes we have seen is the work from home culture. It is really normal nowadays, way more normal than it was prior to the pandemic, right? And so it's really interesting to look at the fact that we were kind of conditioned and trained to go into the office, right? Just if we think about schooling, we get up and we go to school and we come home and like that's when we're out at school is when we need to be focused and productive, and then when we come home we can be ourselves and da 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 da. But we're never trained on how to work from home. right? That conditioning is not there for us. So then when we do actually get to the point of working from home, we can really fall into a lot of negative habits, right? And some of the most prevalent negative habits that I see both in myself, if I'm going to be fully honest, and in my coaching clients is honestly the isolation piece, like you were talking about. It is so easy to not have a social life when you work from home full time. Even if you work from home like only half the week and you go into the office the other half of the week, you feel the difference of like, oh my God, I'm so much more energized and socialized when I go into the office versus when I'm at home. I feel really drained at the end of the workday, way more so than I am in the office. Like, why is that? Right?
Mhm.
It's probably because you're missing that human connection.
My personal preference is actually to go into the office because I
Mhm.
like to separate my work
Yeah,
from my home life. And when I come to the
absolutely.
work, I'm fortunate enough, I have my own office, so it's all set up how I want it. I can just sit down.
Mhm.
Everything's, how I want it. Whereas at home, it's not as focused on the
Right.
intention of work.
Totally. You have those boundaries, right? That separation of space. And I talk a lot about that with my
Mm.
coaching clients too. How can we create that separation of space? How can you have what I call like a commute ritual? Like you're not actually commuting, but if you go in office, you are commuting, and that creates the kind of workday startup ritual in a sense where you know that once you get to the office, you're going to be in a productive state of mind because you're training your brain to do that, right? How can we do that at home? Let's create our own version of a commute ritual for at home. For me, that looks like going and taking my dog for a walk before I start work, right? Because then I enter my apartment and I enter my office, and then it kind of feels like I'm entering after a commute.
Mm.
So that's how I do it for myself. But again, it's going to look different for everybody. So it's those kind of things, though, that I always encourage my coaching clients. Like, if you do work better from home or in office, what are the things that help you work better in that location, and how can you bring that into the other location?
So then what are some practical steps we can
Mm.
take to define those boundaries and, set routines that will be able to divide that work and home life day?
Yes. So I think step number one, just kind of the same with the vision, similar step number one is getting reflective, right? And here's a little framework that you can follow that is so easy to do, takes maybe a couple of minutes a day, but can really give you all of the insights that you need to know to make some changes. At the end of your workday, I want you to end your workday by asking yourself two questions and answer these questions either in a journal, in your notes app, whatever works for you, but keep track of your answers, is my main point. Question number one: what worked for me today? What went well, right? Let's acknowledge what actually went well. Did you get into the flow quickly? Did you really kill the sales call? Like, what went well today? Second question: what did not go well? What did not work for me today? Maybe you skipped lunch. Maybe you were late to a meeting. All of these things that didn't go well. So then if you answer that, let's say for 1 week, right? One work week, 5 days. At the end of that, you'll have 5 days of journaling that you can then kind of look back and review, and you'd be like, "You know what? Every day this did not work for me. This clearly needs to be a boundary for me. How can I make this work for me? How can I move it to the other question?" Right? So that is kind of step one, figuring out and self-discovery, learning what boundaries you need by figuring out what's working, what's not working. From there, I want you to choose just one boundary to test out for 2 weeks, right? I think kind of like what I was saying earlier with this all or nothing mindset, we so often have this big audacious goal and we get really excited about it and we want to make all of these changes. And maybe we can keep up with it for a day or two, but then life happens and we end up backtracking. And then we beat ourselves up for backtracking, and then we don't end up retrying. This is
Mhm.
like the all or nothing cycle that happens with us. It's very human, but I want to avoid that cycle, right? And so let's avoid it by focusing on only one boundary at a time. Out of your reflection, what's that one thing, that one change that's going to make the biggest difference? That's the first change to focus on. Focus on it for 2 weeks, experiment with it, test it out, see different ways you can go about it. Once you feel comfortable with it, go ahead and choose another from your reflection. You can even do another week of reflection if you wanted to as well, right? To get more updated insights and data on yourself. But that's what I always suggest, or how I always suggest going about this, because if it's not personal, if it's not tied to how you are currently working or not working, then the changes you make aren't going to help. They have to be tailored to your lifestyle, your workload, your goals, your distractions, your struggles, your lack of boundaries, right?
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the work day,
Mhm.
and we talked about the commute. And another portion you speak of, though, is the workday shutdown ritual.
Yes. Oh, I was
Yeah.
hoping you would bring this up.
So what is that, and what are the benefits of practicing, such a daily ritual?
So if you feel like you are really struggling to have any form of work life balance, like you are running on empty and your evenings get away from you, they're no longer yours, you need a workday shutdown ritual. A workday shutdown ritual is a routine that you do at the end of your workday to shift your brain out of work mode and into personal mode. Just like with the commute ritual and that workday startup ritual that we talked about, that purpose is to shift your brain into work mode, into productive mode. This is just the opposite. This is so that way you can actually end your workday and let go of work for the night. Go
Mm.
enjoy your life, right? I like to practice this ritual at the same time of day, roughly, right? I always try to do it within the same 30-minute time frame. And this is to help train my brain to know that once it comes around this time of day, it's time to let go of work. It's time to move on. Even if I feel like I didn't finish everything that I wanted to, I value balance, right? So I'm still going to do my workday shutdown ritual and have my nights. So it's a little bit of a choice, right? And balance is a series of choices like that. And it's also a little bit of using your brain as a superpower that it is. So I'm going to share my workday shutdown ritual as inspiration. Um, Big caveat here, do not, number one, just try to copy mine. And also, when you create yours, make it short. At the end of the workday, the last thing we want to do is something big, something long. We want something that's really quick and easy, right? So that's why my workday shutdown ritual takes a max of 5 minutes. And that is the longest that I would encourage anyone to do. I would honestly suggest starting with just one activity and then building from there, right? So my workday shutdown ritual looks like this. I will end the last task of whatever it is that I'm doing. I'll wrap it up and then I'll review my task list for the day. And I'll be like, what did I get done? Right? What went well? And then I'll be like, what did I not get done? What did not work for me today? All the things that I did not get done, let me look at my calendar for the rest of the week. Let me see when I can do those. Let me schedule those in for appropriate times, realistic times. Let me not overwhelm myself later on in the week. Let me be strategic about this, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll outline or move things around if I need to. I don't always need to, right? Um, and then I'll always end my day with a little bit of a gratitude practice. What were 3 things today that I am so grateful happened? Right? Let me look at all the bright things, all the good things that happened today. Even if it felt like a really crappy day, there's still 3 things that I can be grateful for. And then I will declutter my digital environment. And that means I will close any tabs that I don't need anymore, get rid of them. I always say a decluttered space is a decluttered mind, right? So get rid of all those tabs, and then I'll declutter my desk, right? If I have post-it notes out, I'll put away my cube timers, my coffee mug goes in the dishwasher. Like I just clean up and set myself up for success for the next morning. That way, when I sit down at my desk, I don't have any clutter. I know exactly what it is I need to do for the next day and everything. And then the very last thing that I do is I write down my daily plan for tomorrow. So I outline my tasks, I time block my schedule, and then I close or I turn off all the lights in my office, push in my office chair, exit my office, and close the door. And once I close that door, that's it. I'm in personal mode.
The
There's nothing that
workday
can make
is
me go back.
over.
Exactly.
Well, that's good. That's good. So, you have this, these rituals of a commute ritual,
Mhm.
which then ends with a work day shutdown ritual. And I
Exactly.
think that's a great way for people to separate those boundaries
Yes.
between, you know, work and life, but also be productive and present in both.
Exactly. A cool thing about a workday shutdown ritual, especially if you here's one hack that I really suggest doing with your workday shutdown ritual. In the morning, once you maybe finish your commute ritual, I want you to decide what time you are ending your workday today, right? So that way you then kind of create that urgency for yourself. And you're like, if I know I am going to do my workday shutdown ritual at 6 p.m. tonight, I better get my to do list done. So that way I can go and enjoy my night. So that way I don't feel guilty about it. So that way I can let it go. So it kind of creates this sense of urgency a little bit too, which, especially for procrastinators, can be exactly what you need to just get started on some
Mm.
tasks, to just make momentum, right? So I definitely encourage you to do that too.
Yeah, well, and that's a great segue into the next thing I want to talk to you about. And this is this idea of to stop thinking and take action. What is that specifically about when you promote people to do that process?
So I love that you brought this up because I think so often we beat ourselves up for overthinking, right? Which leads to more overthinking, which leads to more procrastination, which leads to more dread and then more avoidance. Then pretty soon we're in the cycle and we're like, oh my God, like why can't I ever do anything? Why can't I follow through? Right. And then you really take a toll on your self worth. And so, number one, that's really normal. That's so human, right? And it's really frustrating too. And so when you're in those moments of knowing that you need to take action on something, but not wanting to, being full of dread, full of procrastination, full of self doubt, even, what is a trick that you can use that uses your brain as a superpower that it is to force yourself to kind of take action and build momentum? The trick that I love using that I actually first heard about from James Clear in Atomic Habits, and then I also read about it in, I believe it was Getting Things Done by David Allen. They both talk about this trick, and it's called the 2 minute rule. And all it is that if a task takes 2 minutes or less, do it right then and there to get it off your plate, off your mind, and to just move on, right? I kind of like to use this tool in a different way too. So let's say you're procrastinating something and it feels like a really big project. Let's say you're creating a report for a client, right? That's a big project. It's going to take more than 2 minutes, isn't it? So I want you to, number one, break it down into 2 minute actions, right? What's the first 2 minutes? What is that going to look like? What's the next 2 minutes? What's that going to look like? Okay, you know what? Just do the first 2 minutes. Just get started. Just 2 minutes. We can all commit to 2 minutes, right? Even if we really don't want to, we can still do it. And what's really cool about this is that it triggers what's called the Zygarnik. I think that's what it's called. Zygarnik. Honestly, I've only read that term. I've never actually heard it. So forgive me if I am mispronouncing that. But the Zygarnik effect is triggered in our brain once we do the 2 minute task. And that effect basically means that our brain craves closure. Have you ever binged a TV show and the episode ends on a cliffhanger? And you're just like, oh my God, what happens next? I need to know. All right, next episode. And then pretty soon you're 4 episodes in, 4 hours later, and you're like, oh, whoops. Well, you felt the need to watch the next episode because of the Zygarnik effect,
Mm.
right? You need closure. Okay, so let's take that principle and apply it to our work. If we get started on something for just 2 minutes, very low commitment, really easy to do, even if you're dreading it, avoiding it, procrastinating it, you can still commit to 2 minutes. And then the Zygarnik effect kicks in and momentum starts to build. And once that 2 minute timer is up, your brain is either going to be like, okay, I'm so over this. Let's try again tomorrow. And if that's the case, that's fine. You tried, you put in the effort. That was a 1% effort. That's great. Try again tomorrow. But 9 times out of 10, your brain is then going to say, but you can do this next part. It's really short. Like, oh, but why not just finish this thing real quick? Like, you know what? Just wrap this one part up and you'll be good, right? We kind of then start creating that momentum naturally because all we were really procrastinating was the act of getting started. So if we make getting started only 2 minutes long, then we actually don't feel as much resistance to it. We're willing to do it. And then we trigger that effect in our brain. And then the brain superpower kicks in, and suddenly it feels a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's great. I like this. And this idea, though, of the procrastination
Hmm.
cycle. And this concept, though, of having an inner critic.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone has an inner critic. And do you feel that procrastination really ignites our inner critic and that sort of beats us down and prevents us from moving forward?
I absolutely do. And here's why. Procrastination ultimately is breaking a promise with yourself, right? Because you are procrastinating something that you said you were going to do. That's why that's like the definition of procrastination. So, meaning you then are going back on your own word to yourself. You're breaking trust with yourself. That hurts. Even if we don't like realize that's what we're doing, we feel it, right? We feel that sense of maybe not feeling good enough, maybe wondering why you're incapable, beating yourself up for not following through. These are all things that are happening as a direct result of you breaking that trust with yourself. And that could also seep into relationships because then if you start to deplete your own trust in yourself and your ability to follow through, you're not going to trust other people, right? And it's going to really seep in to your mindset, your identity, your self beliefs. And so I really do believe that the inner critic is such a big part of procrastination. And if we didn't have the inner critic, I doubt we would procrastinate as much, honestly. So it's definitely one of those things that I always encourage my clients to just slow down, be aware of what you are saying to yourself, how you're talking to yourself, catch yourself, and then talk to yourself like you would talk to a kid. You would never tell a little kid that they're not good enough, that they're not doing enough, that they're not being enough. You would instead say, it's okay. Let's figure out what happened. Let's try again tomorrow. Like, don't worry. What's the lesson we learned? Right? Just because we grow up does not mean we don't deserve that same love, that same kindness, that same support. And we cannot control or rely on anyone around us. We can only rely on ourselves, right? So let's become our biggest support. Let's embody that self talk that we should be giving to other people, to ourselves too. And that will empower you to at least catch those moments of procrastination, those moments of spiraling, and to be like, you know what? I'm going to empower myself. I'm going to forgive myself, give myself a little bit of grace, remind myself I'm human, and figure out what's my 2 minute action. Let me just do 2 minutes.
Great. That's some sage advice. Now, Emily, I really enjoyed our conversation and I've been
Yeah.
procrastinating this moment as long
Yeah.
as I can, but we're going to have to bring our conversation to an end.
Oh.
But I would like to bring this somewhat full circle back
Mm.
to a question that I like to ask my guests, which is this idea. People often talk about, what would you say to the younger you as a piece of advice?
Mm.
I like to turn it on its head. And this brings back us being the authors of our own story. So now, if the younger Emily Guerra could see the story of her life unfold and maybe was hoping to be a wedding planner, but didn't actually get to be that, how would she see the story as it's currently unfolding as a character in that plot line?
I think she would be really proud because she somehow turned the things that she thought would be the things that bring her down, like not realizing you had ADHD and really struggling with your mental health and your mindset, and you were able to turn those things into points of empowerment and into a business ultimately. So I think she would be really proud of how I was able to use my experiences, flip them on its head, and use my experiences to then help others and empower others. Because ultimately, that's what little Emily was really all about. She just wanted to make sure that everyone felt supported, heard, and loved. And I think she would be really proud of how much growth I've had and the ability I have shown in being able to understand and share and empower in my experiences. I
Right.
love that question. Thank you.
So, will the current Emily soon be able to fulfill her
Mm.
dream of planning a wedding?
I
Her
think
own, perhaps?
so. I think my own, perhaps, maybe the next year or two. We'll see. I have been with my boyfriend for, oh my God, 4.5 years now. So we'll see.
Okay, well, hopefully that dream will be fulfilled.
Exactly. It will
A-
be.
And now I'm going to start my podcast shutdown ritual
Yes.
by
Oh, I love
thanking you for being a guest on the show. And I hope you have a fantastic day.
Well, thank you so much. This was such a fun and insightful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Hey, listener, if you're looking for tips, tricks, and tools to help you become more productive in your daily routines, I'd highly recommend visiting Emily's website at theproductivityflow.com. Be sure to check out the blog section for free workbooks and resources to help you get on track. Once again, thank you for joining me on Humdrummity, and I really hope you're enjoying the content my guests are providing on this podcast. Take care, and now get out there and achieve your anything.